Welcome. I'm Avinash Persaud, and this is Power and Planet, where the hum of electricity meets the whisper of forests. Today, I'm in Belém, at the edge of the Brazilian Amazon, the place where urgency meets possibility. And I'm asking, why does Belém matter? 3 movements: alignment, action, finance. In one of his letters to the world, André Correa do Lago, president of COP30, wrote of the dance between forest, climate, desertification, and development. Not side by side, but bound together. When climate speaks, nature listens. When nature sighs, climate trembles. They're not separate stories. They are one development story. Alignment means ending the old split screen, energy versus environment, people versus planet, climate versus development. Here in Belém, the forest is not fringe, it is front line. Belém whispers, you cannot save the climate while you wound the forest. You cannot progress power while ignoring the ecosystem that sustains it. And when we align development, climate, and nature, and count the true costs of our choices, we unlock something profound. Livelihoods strengthened, migration slowed, pandemics contained, carbon stored, species preserved. Belém is where alignment becomes architecture, where the synergy of development, climate, and nature is mainstreamed. Multilateral development banks are building that structure, a common framework to measure and value climate and nature co-benefits. It didn't begin here, but it takes shape here. Alignment made real. The Belém Framework. Action. In another letter, Correa do Lago asked, do we choose change or do we let catastrophe choose us? Action is no longer optional, but neither is it aspirational. The world is already doing, already learning, already moving. Enough action exists to build upon. Developing countries, excluding China, spend around $300 billion each year on adaptation and on responding to loss and damage. And of the $3 trillion spent last year on new energy, $2 trillion was in renewables. Developing country banks and investors already hold $3 trillion in performing assets, projects built, permitted, and paid for, proof of what works and who can deliver. We'll come back to finance. But for now, the point is, we're not inventing from nothing. We're innovating to scale, to deepen, to deliver. Belém is not about more negotiation. It's about more action. In Parastate, the Inter-American Development Bank is working with the state government to build 55 heat-ready schools. Not because 55 is enough, but because they set a model, an example for others to follow. How nature-based design can cool classrooms without costing the earth. Elsewhere, development banks are building resilient roads, hospitals, mobile clinics, and flood defenses to defy hurricanes and other climate impacts. Belém will showcase a granary of examples. Proof that we can build resilience, protect livelihoods, and breathe clean air while sustaining the forest. We're not waiting on miracles. We already have the technology, the knowledge, the tools, which just makes our inaction worse, because we have few excuses left. Belém matters because it spells out the action agenda. Practical, doable, now. Finance. Of course, it's not a rosy garden. The obstacle is not ignorance, it is finance. Yes, developing countries, excluding China, already spend $300 billion a year on adaptation and resilience and responding to loss and damage, but the cost of that capital is so high that is less for education and health, and the adaptation finance gap is only widening. Middle-income developing countries may now produce 60% of current fossil fuel emissions and face a wave of new energy demand. But if they look for renewable energy investors, the same investors that fund 80% of renewable investments in developed countries, only 2% of global institutional capital reaches them. Correa do Lago and Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando Haddad called for a new financial architecture. We need one. Here's how it could work. Divide climate and nature-positive development into 3 categories: revenues, savings, costs. Revenues, savings, costs. Revenue generators, renewables, resilient agriculture should be funded by private capital. Savings generators, like resilient infrastructure, fit multilateral development banks and public lenders. Cost-only projects, like rebuilding low-income homes after storms, require grants and donor money. Private finance can fund the first category without subsidy today, because technology and falling costs have now advanced to make it viable, as long as national and multilateral development banks help coordinate and manage the non-commercial risks, like foreign exchange and liquidity squeezes. Multilateral development banks, MDBs, invested $26 billion in resilience last year in low and middle-income countries and are on track for $60 billion per year by 2030. Recent capital adequacy reforms created $500 billion to $1 trillion in new lending capacity of MDBs. With shareholder support, they could finance the major part of the resilient infrastructure needs of low and middle-income countries through long-term, low-cost loans. But even at AAA borrowing rates, some of the lowest in the world, it's still more public debt in fiscally constrained countries, on top of other debt often accumulated from climate disasters not of their making. We need new metrics that recognize debt for resilience investments as sustainable debt. And we need new instruments to help MDBs use their lending headroom more quickly, more impactfully for resilience. For countries with little fiscal space, we also need more debt for resilience swaps. That's frees resources for resilience without adding to debt. At Belém, with COP CEO Anna Toni, IDB will debut the first multi-guarantor debt swap facility, uniting private insurers, governments, philanthropies with MDBs to scale up non-debt increasing resilience finance. And in this new debt architecture, every instrument should carry pause clauses for natural disasters, where debt service is paused for 2 years and then added back on. Instant liquidity equal to 10, 20, or 30% of national income, not the 1 or 2% we see today from insurance or cat bonds. The IDB has already expanded pause clause capacity up now to $4 billion, and we invite others to follow. Donor funds must focus where markets and banks cannot, on loss and damage. Because all the donor money in the world cannot cover that alone. And in a world of scarce money, every source of money must first be applied to where the other sources won't go. Now the missing piece, private money. At Belém, Inter-American Development Bank President Ilan Goldfein and Tatiana Rosito, representing Brazil's finance ministry, will launch ReInvest Plus. a way to turn today's 3 trillion in performing developing country assets into fuel for tomorrow's climate and nature positive development. Here's how. We purchase these mature loans. It's a original entry point because it's where it is easiest to convert without public subsidy these local loans into investment grade, hard currency securities, attractive to pension funds and insurers. These conversions through diversification, portfolio level insurance, and ratings paid for by the investor lowers the returns but are still attractive in their new form. The proceeds of the sale are then used to repeat and repeat and repeat, cycling billions to trillions. And when we buy these original loans at good prices from the local banks, we require them to reinvest the proceeds in new projects aligned with national development plans like NDCs and NAPs. If they don't, they lose eligibility. They're chucked out of the program. In short, the money won't get there in one step, but it will in 2. IDB is the bridge, and we invite other MDBs to join us to take this global. That's discipline, that's scale, that's ReInvest Plus. Belém matters because it can be the launchpad where public finance builds resilience and private capital meets the development frontier, where money moves with meaning. The world has waited, held its breath for too long. Belém is our exhale. Belém matters for alignment, because development, climate, and nature are siblings, and the Belém framework binds them. Belém matters for action, because the time is now, a showcase of what works, what's proven, and what must be scaled. Belém matters for finance, because with ingenuity, innovation, and partnership, capital can flow where it's most needed. Through ReInvest Plus, through more debt swaps, through more MDB low-cost long-term loans for resilient infrastructure. Together, these can unlock 1.3 trillion in international finance for development that is climate and nature positive. Let the words of André Correa do Lago and COP CEO Anotoni echo through the conference halls. Move, align, act, invest. Are you coming to Belém to watch or to join in? Meet me there, at the edge of action, at the heart of alignment, at the frontier of finance. Thank you for joining me on Power and Planet.